Welcome back to Second Breakfast and our ongoing horror discussions, bringing you the best thoughts, theories, and literary analysis this side of the North Pole.
Ah, the North Pole. Very good. Very clever.
Oh, yeah.
Sneaky,
so we're
sneaky.
here today to talk about Terrifier 3.
Ooh.
Longtime listeners will know how much we adore this franchise. We did an episode right around the release of Terrifier 2, 2 years ago, where we covered kind of the movies up until that point. So this character, Art the Clown, popped up first in All Hallows Eve, which was an anthology, and he was one of the few big scary characters introduced in that movie. Of course, everyone took a shine to him. So then there was Terrifier 1 and then Terrifier 2. That episode covers all of those films. But right now, 2 years later, we've been waiting for this all year. We are back to talk about Terrifier 3.
I have such a love and adoration for this series. I feel very protective of it.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because it's this amazing indie success story. And you can tell everybody involved is so passionate and cares so much, and it keeps breaking ground with every new iteration, every new installment. It keeps setting all these records, and I feel so proud of it. That's my son right
Exactly.
there.
You feel involved and invested.
Yeah.
Because this really does feel grassroots. This does feel indie and an inspirational. We were talking about this at dinner last night. It feels like kind of the American dream.
Yeah,
so the first movie, Terrifier 1, was made for $50,000. And it still holds up and it's incredible.
It's so good.
The second one, crowdfunded, and the budget got big enough, the crowdfunding campaign was successful enough that it was, I believe, $250,000. And then that one made a lot of money.
Yeah.
That one popped off at the box
that's what
office.
really skyrocketed this franchise.
Right.
Yeah.
So this one, where Damien Leone, the writer-director, who also did the makeup and created this character, he stayed indie and unrated, didn't go to a studio, didn't water it down, didn't remove all the gore and the grossness, stayed unrated, stayed independent with a $2 million budget for Terrifier 3.
Which is still, it's so much more than he had to work with before, but $2 million is a tiny movie budget, in the grand scheme of things. For horror, it's not as small, because horror is, classically low budget, especially when it's really good. You know what I mean? But, still, that's crazy.
The comparison, of course, is that the Joker sequel, which came out last week,
the other clown movie,
$200 million budget.
Crazy. And it's sorry, that movie didn't do it for me. You know?
So this is a triumph. I do feel complicit and responsible and excited. I'm rooting for this as much as I'm excited to just go and watch it.
Yes.
It was us reading the trades in the day after, and we can now happily report that this is the #1 movie in America. An unrated, fucked up, scary clown horror movie is the #1 movie in America, storming the box office.
Wild stuff. What a perfect story. Are we going to spoil this movie?
Yes.
Okay.
So but again, more than any movie we've ever talked about, this is one you want to see. And it doesn't matter if you know absolutely everything that's happening going in. The visuals, the squelching, the gore, the horror of it. You can't dull that edge. There's no amount of spoiler that will change the experience you will have with this movie.
Yeah, truly. So it doesn't even matter how much we spoil it. You're still going to have a fantastic time if you haven't seen it yet, and then you go see it later.
And this one, I guess, as a little pitch for a second, because of course we want to get the word out. That's part of why we do this. This is a continuation of the story and the characters, especially from Terrifier 2. There was a lot of world building in that sequel.
Yes, right. This is a true continuation. Yeah.
This is 5 years later. We're catching up with those characters. We've got the rematch brewing. But also, this one is set on and themed around Christmas.
So much fun.
Which is going to make it a wonderful annual rewatch.
Absolutely. That's going to be our Christmas Eve.
So before we get into things that are more, content-based, more substantial, were you grossed out by this?
Oh,
unrated
fully.
Christmas horror?
Yes.
How did this hit you?
Well, and I knew it was going to be gross, obviously, because of all the other ones so far, and they had released, it's great marketing for horror. They had released videos of audience footage, footage of audience members watching the movie and being disgusted and freaked out and terrified. That's always going to be good marketing. So that's really, really fun. So I had known that it was going to be crazy going in, and I was pretty grossed out. I think because of the hype, I'm weird. I think I maybe was expecting, I can't say I was expecting more, because this was crazy, but I don't know. I think I thought it was going to be just a tiny bit more unhinged, but it still was by far one of the goriest movies I've ever seen.
Did you look away? Did you feel pukey?
I felt a little queasy near the end, the way with the rats. That kill's pretty disgusting. But otherwise, no. But again, I have a pretty high tolerance, especially like I think I've said this before. What really grosses me out is bones breaking. Like I felt much queasier watching The Substance than I did watching this. Even though this movie is much gorier, I was more personally psychologically freaked out by the gore in The Substance. Actually, what about you?
Yeah, I think there's a gross out factor that obviously is the first thing people talk about this in the same way they broad brush around the Saw franchise.
Yeah.
I was struck by how differently the horror hit me in this film as opposed to the 3 previous Art the Clown movies.
Oh, okay.
This one, I wasn't as grossed out. Of course, there were moments of that.
Yeah.
But I do think, weirdly enough, it's slightly a step back from what Terrifier 2 did in the gore department.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what, like, all the major kills and gore moments
like
of
the
Terrifier
things you
2.
actually see, the explicit, what you're actually looking at. I think that was a touch more conservative, a little bit of a step back from what we saw in the previous film. But to fill that void, I felt so much more dread this time.
Okay. Yeah, I felt a lot more like emotional upset in this one.
It made a lot of the kills and a lot of the scenes much more harrowing and difficult and horrendous to watch, but that wasn't because of the gore.
Right. Yeah, it was just more impactful because there was, I think, just more character work going on, and there was just more investment because it's like a sequel,
which makes it a stronger film. I mean, it's part of what I love about this franchise is watching it develop in real time, because you're seeing how the actors grow into the role. We're going to talk about Art the Clown, how he's progressed in a second, but specifically with Damien Leone as a writer and as a director, never mind with the makeup and the effects. Obviously those are, even if there's a little less this time than there was in the second one, I think they're still top notch for horror.
Yeah, and like if you compare it to any other movie out right now, like
But I think the big evolution in this film is him growing as a writer, which is why you have that level of character investment in dread instead of just the kind of schlock blowing up and splattering across the screen. I think the characterization is really what struck me.
Yes.
And that started from the very first scene. Let's talk about this opening sequence for a minute.
Like that really sets the tone for the amount of like emotional distress and gore you're about to experience.
It felt like a thesis. It felt like, because obviously this one is opening on many more screens, it's going to hit a wider market. Every new entry in a horror film, even though there's always, we're lore freaks, we love how convoluted Saw becomes. I think it turns into a kind of procedural soap opera, and that's so much fun. And there's some of that here. But I think when you're getting your shot on the big stage, you also need to be approachable.
Yes,
and this one does work as a standalone as much as it rewards those who followed the previous iterations.
Yeah, I was gonna say they're all like that. Like as they go on, you get more of like the stories tying together, throughout the course of the different movies. But yeah, a good horror sequel is when you could just watch standalone. Like it could be your entry point into the whole series. You don't always have to start with the first one.
But for this being what for a lot of people will be their first Terrifier movie, where the word of mouth and the Christmas aesthetic, that's going to hit a lot of people.
Right, and it's just a wider theatrical release, so more people get the chance to go see it.
So their first experience with the entire franchise, this is technically the 4th film, their first experience will be the first scene of Terrifier 3.
Right.
So that's why I'm calling it like a thesis statement. And this is where that dread hits, because it's not just the setup of, spoiler again, it's not just the setup of Art the Clown's going to kill the whole family in this house on Christmas Eve. You know that's going to happen. From the first second, you know where that's going.
Right, you're like, oh, so this is our entry scene, like because like you know that none of these characters are going to stick around. You can just tell.
But it's the slow build. It is that dread. It is how genuinely I feel like this film captures the Christmas spirit. Yeah. And how we talked about this a lot when we did an episode on The Strangers. Sorry, I spaced on the name for a second. And how beautiful and lived in that house felt.
Yes,
It felt like a home. It felt decorated and lived in. The warmth of the colors, the personality of the decor, it just felt real, which made the movie that much more troubling.
Yes, because it felt like a real house that you've been in and not a set.
This opening sequence, it felt like how you remember Christmas Eve when you were a kid.
Totally. Especially because a lot of this is from the POV of the little girl. So you're seeing Christmas Eve from a kid's eyes.
But that's not a guarantee that you're going to capture that feeling.
Yeah, right.
A lot of that is in the directing. It's that warmth and kind of color bleed of all the Christmas lights. It feels cozy. It feels cold. It's her kind of stomping around talking to the parents. It really does feel like a warm Christmas thing, while because it's a horror movie, you know immediately what's ratcheting up in the background.
Right. Especially like there's a couple little things that make it feel a little more tense and like something's not quite right. Obviously you're going into a horror movie, so you know something bad's going to happen. So already you've got that buy-in. But 2, you've got the doors open, and then like the sound design, like the sound is just a little too loud. Like the door opening, the footsteps, it's all a little too loud and a little too unsettling, and there are like too many dark corners, you know? And so there's just that little hint of there's something not quite right about this beautifully cozy, nostalgic scene going on.
And you get that same dread and kind of sickening excitement that you do when you hear the Jaws theme.
Yes,
or
right.
when you hear the revving up of the chainsaw before you see Leatherface barreling into frame. You have that excitement, that anticipation. And I think I really got a sense of Damien Leone and David Howard Thornton waiting and building.
And just like sitting there like their fingers together like tee hee hee,
They're gleeful. You could feel them kind of beaming as they set up the dominoes and then blew through this family at the end of the sequence.
Ugh.
I thought it was just a wonderful way. It was like a welcome back after 2 years, but also if that's your first impression of this franchise, that's perfect.
Yes, and I thought that the emotional stakes were really well balanced because on its face, like, yeah, it's deeply upsetting to watch a family be, annihilated around Christmas time, especially after you see like the way the mom cares about the daughter and she tries to help her go back to bed and cheer her up and do the thing. Let's leave cookies for the elves and whatever. But then you still get that little bit, like it's not too much because you understand there's like a hierarchy of the characters, right? Because you care the most about later on Sienna and like her story and all of those people. And so you add a little element of, yeah, but we don't have to care too much about these people because you make the husband kind of a dick and like kind of a bad dad and like not really caring so much. And you can tell that there's some strain in that relationship and she's trying to live with it. So you don't feel too bad when the dad dies, like it's the worst when the rest of the family dies. But like, I don't know. It's like it's helping develop that hierarchy of the characters. So okay, these are not my main characters and I can move on from them.
Yeah. And those characters that we meet later or return to later, those are the plot. Those are the characters of this world, the protagonists. This family at the beginning, they're basically just audience surrogates.
Yes.
It's a place for you to think about, oh shit, this guy's really scary, and there's no way I would get out of there.
Right.
You can Bella Swan yourself onto these characters and really feel invested and scared. You do you know what I mean?
Yes,
you can transpose yourself into this world.
And then you can imagine, it's going to be even like so much worse when a character I really know and care about is in danger or is killed. Yeah, for sure.
Let's talk about Art the Clown for a second because I was struck differently by him. I think he's one of my favorite horror protagonists at this point. Obviously, he's...
Protagonist?
I mean, he kind of, leads. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Icon.
Slasher
icon.
Yeah.
He's the breakout horror icon of the past, 20 years?
10, 20 years, yeah.
I mean, there are some franchises that are popular, like Paranormal Activity doesn't really have an icon.
Right, we haven't, like, the closest is Jigsaw, and even then, he's, fallen off. And isn't quite
Tobin Bell's still great. The movies fall off around him.
Well, yeah, it's not his fault, but like his staying power has minimized quite a lot in the last 10 years.
And you have great character design. I mean, we talked about the Vortilac last week, and The Substance has some great body horror, but those don't have the character design that is just the first second you see it, it's magnetic.
Right.
It's iconic. I mean, what that word is supposed to mean.
Exactly, yeah.
And I could look at him all day. I did look at him all day. I was doing a portrait of Art the Clown, so I rewatched these films.
You should include that in this video on YouTube.
Maybe I will.
I'm saying it right now. I think you should do it. It's an amazing illustration.
And I think you can tell that David Howard Thornton has been playing this character for a while because he's comfortable in this skin.
Yeah.
He knows the beats, but that means he also gets to play and experiment and mature with the character. And I got a lot of that here. I thought he was leaning into the physicality of Art the Clown, being a clown. He felt more slapstick. He felt more, he was doing more mime.
He was a little goofier, and it didn't make him less scary. Like, he's still the scariest thing you've ever seen. And if you saw him in person, you would, shit your pants, run away, and call the police. But he's leaning into that funny part of it too, which I enjoyed.
And I think the script leaned into those talents and gave him more room for that. I think he had more of a stage to perform on in this film.
Yeah.
When he's walking by the window outside the bar and he sees the mall Santa inside, I mean, that's like 30 seconds of just letting him be funny.
Oh my gosh,
and
it was so funny. That whole scene was really good. I really enjoyed that scene.
When the two teenagers are talking about how scary Art the Clown is inside the dorm, and he's listening in the doorway and reacting and miming at all the things they say.
It's so funny.
Like, there are all of these beautiful showcase moments for the character and his like gleeful, sadistic enjoyment of all this.
And even like when, like later on, in spoilers, like when Sienna's tied up, he keeps slapping her in the back of the head.
Right.
Like, it's such a mean thing to do. It's so mean and cruel, and like, you're so upset for her, but it's also so funny. And our whole theater kept laughing every time he did that. Like, in that way of, this is so upsetting and terrible, but his physical comedy is still so inescapably funny.
And
it was beautiful.
It doesn't break the tension.
No, it doesn't. Not in the way that
complicates it.
Yes, exactly. Again, because it's part of his character. That's part of his brand of evil, is that he is funny and mean in that way. Yeah, it was perfect. I really enjoyed that element.
Yeah, and apparently that was just like an improv suggestion that Leone threw out when they were filming.
That's so funny.
But you're right. That's the thing I've seen on social media.
Because it's so like dismissive, and
it's such a
cruel.
great character beat.
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
Let's talk about this kind of other side of it. Yes, Art is being more funny than we've seen before, but even the way we previewed talking about the opening scene, there's more dread here. There's more heart. I found this film, just as a film, never mind as a horror film and a horror sequel, I found this to be an enormously human movie.
Sure.
There was so much heart here, to the point that the family scenes, and I found this rewatching Terrifier 2 the other day, where I thought the pacing was not as tight as it is in Terrifier 3.
Yeah, the pacing does struggle a bit. They cover a lot of ground in Terrifier 2. It's a fantastic movie, but there's a lot going on.
And the family scenes, especially in the first half of Terrifier 2, they felt like comparative downtime.
Yeah.
And I did not feel that way in Terrifier 3.
No, it's much more efficiently done.
It didn't feel like a break from the action. It felt like hype.
Yes, and like a key moment in the plot. And like, you understand that they're trying to help you understand this family dynamic and get invested, but plot is still moving along, character stuff is still happening, so it doesn't feel quite as standstill.
And for being the fourth movie in the franchise, I'm never sure how much people count All Hallows Eve, but for our sakes, I think it's the fourth one.
Yeah.
For being the fourth movie, it feels like the first true sequel. Where it's
right, because Terrifier 2 feels like a reboot of the story and the characters, and like that's when we first meet Sienna, and like, she's our main character, but she's not at all in the other movies.
Right.
So yeah, no, I know what you're saying. And so this is like our first sequel to that like setup, that initial protagonist build up.
But it's also because it feels like a reaction to Terrifier 2. It feels like the other half of that couplet. It is a response to that movie, and I think there are parts of the iconography that lend to this idea. In the second movie, there was a scene where Art had the can of hairspray and the lighter, and he had this like impromptu flamethrower.
Yes.
And I was struck by, like, a day after watching this, that Terrifier 3 has a similar scene where he's kind of, instead of a flamethrower, he's kind of got an ice thrower.
Oh yeah, the liquid nitrogen.
Where he jerry-rigs, this way to freeze people and then hack off parts of their body. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was an interesting sort of couplet and inversion.
I totally forgot about that flamethrower thing. That's very funny. I like that.
Like, the film is a response. It feels like a response to the previous movie. And it's dealing specifically in the consequences of the previous film in a way that the franchise has really only done so far with Victoria.
Right, yeah.
She's a great follow-through for the whole franchise, but this one deals with all the shit we saw in Terrifier 2 by being kind of a character-first PTSD drama
Well, exactly.
for half of its runtime.
Yeah, half of this is about Sienna trying to deal with that. Yeah.
And I thought that was incredibly effective. And because she was surrounded by family that we quickly got to care about, I thought it beautifully avoided some of the pitfalls of the Halloween franchise, where we have the lonely Laurie Strode, and she's got a couple new people in her life that you know are not going to survive the movie.
Yeah.
And then you just have to keep setting that up again and again. I didn't feel that way.
No,
I didn't
either.
know exactly what was going to happen to these family members. I just always felt that dread, that sense of the roller coaster cranking up higher and higher with each new character because I cared about them. I cared about the aunt and the uncle and the brother and the cousin, I guess. Would Gabbie be a cousin?
Yeah, her cousin.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I cared about them. And I felt these stronger emotional stakes. There was a real heart to this movie. And a restraint in a way that doesn't make it less of a horror movie, but I think makes it more of a story. Like, when we're talking about that opening sequence, the fact that we don't see Art kill the little girl, that does speak to some kind of red line.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
like, what did you make of that decision?
Well, yeah. I mean, because even the brother, too, we don't see it happen. We see the aftermath, which is pretty upsetting.
Sure.
But you don't see it happen. Like, the movie kind of knows we can go only so far. And I don't mean that, like, in general, there are rules about how far you can go in gore. I think it really depends on the project and the purpose and, like, all kinds of things. But they had a clear, like, what are they trying to get across? And I think that they knew that if they showed that, especially the little girl, because we've been so invested in her as a character for the first, 10 minutes of the movie, I think they know that would have kind of undone some of what they were trying to do.
But that's what I'm interested in, because that's a line they're drawing for themselves creatively. As an independent, unrated horror film, this is not a studio telling you...
Yeah.
I mean, a studio wouldn't let you do any part of the first scene.
No, it wouldn't.
But especially, they wouldn't let you kill the little girl.
Yeah.
So for them to decide creatively not to do that, I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, it is.
Because like you're saying, that is a choice that's serving the goal of the film.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
I was really
choice.
taken by that. And I was reminded of that later on during the climax. When we get the reveal that the uncle's been killed, we see his head at the top of the Christmas tree.
Yes, right.
And the same thing with the brother. When we put the glasses on the skull.
But we didn't actually see it happen to either of them.
And is that because we've gotten to know them more? I mean, that's slightly undercut by what you see happen to the aunt, but...
I was going to say.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, or it's like, I mean, because you do then see the aftermath. Like, it's not like it all happens off screen. So it's not that they're shying away from the gore. And I don't think it's even necessarily that, well, we only have so much money to, do all these kills. Like, because you have the body hanging on the wall, you have the two different heads. Like,
and we did saw a woman in half in the first movie.
Yeah, right. Like, they could have made it happen if they wanted to. They could have cut back on a set somewhere else. You know what I mean?
Such a gnarly scene.
So it feels like, oh God. So it feels like a creative choice. And yeah, I think it is that. And maybe also it does leave a little bit of room for maybe the brother is still alive somewhere. Like, not the uncle, obviously, because his head's on the tree. Poor guy. But yeah, it's like an acknowledgement that the audience can only take so much.
Do you think?
I think so.
Let's game it out in the other direction.
Yeah.
If you had seen the whole family in the opening sequence die, if you had seen the brother die, if you had seen the uncle die, would you have been left with a different kind of taste in your mouth at the end of the film?
Maybe would have just been a little too overwhelmed. I don't know.
Do you think?
I think so. What do you think?
I don't know, because we've seen all sorts of things in this franchise,
Right.
and none of them have
just-
turned me off wanting to see more.
No, but it's like, I think it's more about the quantity, especially when it's all these characters that, like, what's most upsetting is that the characters have died and that you understand the way they have died. You don't always necessarily need to see the full thing in real time. I think it just gets a little old, and it leaves less time for the actual, like, character work and plot and dialogue of the movie, because what's important there is not us watching, a 3-minute sequence of them being killed. It's watching Sienna's reaction. It's seeing the carnage. It's seeing her reaction to the carnage. I think that's what's more important.
Maybe here's one way to push back on this a little bit. When I was rewatching Terrifier 2, I was struck by how much of almost a co-lead Jonathan felt.
Yeah.
Where there are a lot of those scenes at the end where Art is kind of slowly torturing both of them, and he's whipping them. Remember that thing he makes with all the scalpels and stuff?
Oh, yeah.
At the end of the rope, and he keeps whipping them with that.
Oh, God, yeah. So awful, yeah.
That is as much about Jonathan as it is Sienna, and we have many scenes where we follow Jonathan on his own. When he goes, remember when he goes to the school and he does the dead possum and he sees Art and in the school.
Yeah,
and he's all freaked out.
I remember there's a lot of Jonathan, and there was
Right.
much less Jonathan in this movie. Yeah.
So if the second movie introduces us to Sienna, it also introduces us to Jonathan. And if the third movie is about her processing the trauma of the second one, her PTSD, there's a lot of that with Jonathan too. You see how uncomfortable he is with his college classmates,
Yeah.
and all these people who won't stop asking him about these horrors. So I think I've spent enough time with this character. Like, if they ever killed Sienna in one of these movies, it wouldn't be off screen.
That's
so
true.
I feel a little strange about Jonathan getting sort of a narrative demotion
Well,
here.
see, then that means I think maybe he is still alive.
I
And
agree,
And that's
but-
somebody else's skull. Yeah.
But for the sake of this film, it felt a little weird to me.
Yeah, sure.
Because, like, the uncle, we didn't get to know him that much. And honestly,
No.
we got, like, 2 really nice scenes with the aunt. I
Let's say
thought the performances were great there.
And we saw her death, though. Like, she matters more.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's true.
But I think that death was effective.
It was incredibly
The
effective.
more horrible things you see Art the Clown do, I think the harder it is for me to look away from the character. So I don't ever want to pull the punch.
Okay, so then here's what I think it is. I think it's the choice to show the aunt's death, but not the uncle. The aunt means more. She has more heart. She has a better connection to Sienna. There, and also like the connection between her, Sienna, and the cousin Gabbie. I don't know. There's like that multi-generational like women thing. Like that's interesting. And like Sienna can like take over the role of the aunt, and now she's the maternal figure for Gabbie. That's nice and makes sense and it's clean. I think that Sienna's connection to the uncle is less strong. And I think so not showing his death is sort of indicating again this like character hierarchy that the aunt matters more.
Right.
So then not showing Jonathan I think is a fake out and he's still alive. That's got to be what it is.
One of the things that I think was lingering in my brain going into Terrifier 3, after rewatching the second film, Terrifier, I keep, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
After rewatching Terrifier 2 was, of course, the scene in the bedroom,
Yes.
which was I think the longest kill of the franchise.
It was long.
The most thorough.
It was thorough and drawn out, and it just kept going.
The levels of degradation,
it was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
That was the grossest one of the whole franchise. Yeah.
So when you're talking about this idea of showing too much or more than the audience can handle, if the first movie has the woman being cut in half and the second Terrifier 2 has that scene in the bedroom, I think the audiences are primed.
Sure.
I don't think anyone's asking for a pulled punch there.
I see. Yeah.
Do you think there is one breakout kill that you would put on that level in the third movie?
As like that could be called too much. That's what you mean?
No, just that is the holy shit kill from the movie. If the first one is the one being cut in half and the second one has the scene in the bedroom, what is that scene for the third movie? It's not the scene in the shower.
No, especially because those characters don't matter as much, and like that you almost enjoy because you're like, good, these people suck. You know.
It's also fairly conservatively shot.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we get a lot of hints at things, and I mean, there's still quite a lot shown. Like, don't get me wrong.
Compared to those other two that I'm talking about, there really wasn't. There were angles and cropping in a way that the other two, the horror, I mean, the true horror of those scenes in the previous two films is the static camera.
Yeah.
Because once all the stuff starts happening to the girl in the second one, she's just on the bed, laying there.
Yep.
And all this shit keeps happening. But she's not moving, which means your eyes kind of lock on there. And that's what's so horrifying is the processing time that it gives you. In the same way the woman being strung up in the first one, you have to reckon with that image for a while.
Yeah, you do.
I don't know what the singular kill of this movie was.
I think
it might be the aunt.
Because that's the closest one.
That one's the most static because she's on the chair.
And it does take a long time.
It's the same pose for
and
a while.
because Sienna is watching it. So you have that added layer of horror and you know, awfulness. But yeah, it's not quite the same in this one. You're right.
It's a little different. And it's not better or worse, but it's interesting to kind of chart that evolution.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, you were talking about these sort of references before, some of these allusions. And I was struck with some other kind of, I don't know, observations that I had or memories that were kind of bells that were rung in my head of other horror movies that we love. Obviously, Black Christmas.
Yeah, there's a lot of Black Christmas. Like, obviously, like, it being set at Christmas, but even
But this was released on, like, the 50-year anniversary of Black Christmas?
I think so, because I think it was 1974, so that's pretty cool. Yeah, we did a Black Christmas episode, by the way, on our Patreon last Christmas, I think. Go check it out. But, like, it was in the Christmas setting. it was the shot of the family's house in the first scene looks so much like the shot of the sorority house in Black Christmas. And then, of course, Art being like sitting in that chair by the window was very reminiscent
in the attic. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, up in the attic of the person being sitting up there in the plastic bag as well. So there were a lot of just like little hints like that I really enjoyed.
And the warm aesthetic, that kind of bleed I was talking about on the Christmas lights, where all the colors are kind of melting across the screen like stained glass. There's a lot of that. But it was contained within, you either have a scene like the opener that's kind of a standalone, you have a scene with the Sienna plot, or you have these interstitials where you visit Art and Vicky. And all of the Black Christmas stuff was kind of contained inside one of those Art and Vicky scenes. I thought there was an admirable restraint there.
Yeah, it wasn't too much. It would have been really over the top to do too much of that.
Well, I just think it would have made the movie less of an original.
Right, and less sure of itself. Less confident in what it's doing.
Yes.
Because like if they'd added an element of like a creep on the phone or Art's in a sorority house, like it would have just been too much.
And we talk about that all the time. Especially lately, we talk about the smoothie, the soup of influences, of references, of classic horror that pop up in new horror. And I think if you have one of those references in there too much, if you ring the bell too many times, it starts to feel like you're leaning on that.
Yes.
Or you're just barely building, a new extension on top of that same old haunted house.
Feels kind of lazy almost, yeah.
The confidence of this film is how it makes those references, nods its approval and respect, and then moves on.
Yeah, and does its own different thing.
Because you can say there's some chainsaw in here. With Art using the chainsaw.
Oh, sure, there's a whole chainsaw sequence.
There are multiple. And the way it kind of innovates on top of that by having a duel with a chainsaw versus a sword at the end of the film.
That's right.
Never seen that in Chainsaw.
Yeah.
So that's a fun way to take the illusion and sort of grow past it.
I do like that.
Or in what it does in the very beginning. If you remember, in both versions of Halloween 2, you have really memorable hospital sequences.
Yes.
And you have that here. When you get but it makes it so much grosser and weirder than what you've seen. Instead of it being Michael Myers stalking through different parts of the hospital and them trying to barricade it like the scene in The Godfather, you have the reveal of Vicky and Art's head and all the shit on the wall.
Yeah.
That is so much grosser than any of the stuff. So you have almost
that
this
was upsetting. I forgot about that.
You have almost this misdirection of here's something you've seen before. Here's iconography that you love and enjoy. And then we're going to pivot into something way nastier than you've ever seen. And I love that. I think that's great. A much more fun way than just, we get to see the fucking carpet from The Shining again.
Right. Yeah.
I loved, like you said, kind of the confidence of this film.
Well, and because those little homages just feel more like reverence and love for the genre and the history of the genre. Like you could tell that Damien Leone is a horror fan and like respects and admires all these other things, so much so that he is then doing his own thing and making his own contribution.
Yes, he feels like a historian in that way, where he's not stepping on those toes. He's not following safely in the shadow of previous franchises. And there is just a ballsiness to this, to staying independent, to staying unrated, and going bigger and gnarlier each time. I admire this movie as much as I enjoy it. Let's jump, kind of zoom out a little bit and talk about some thematic things. So I'm legally obligated to do this aside. We get some more world building and some more almost like a magic system.
There's a lot of lore in this one, which I really liked. Yeah.
We clarify the rules.
Sometimes that can get really tedious and annoying and distracting, but I really enjoyed it here. I thought it worked really well.
And as part
Couldn't tell you why, but it worked well.
Because we're interested in horror and the occult and religious shit and all that weird, gross, otherworldly horns and devils, and we like all that.
I just mean, I think other people have tried to do a full, demon backstory in other places, and it's just been tedious. So this one was good.
A good demon is all about creature design, and when you watch Terrifier, even if you don't like that style of horror, you can't deny the creature design.
Sure.
We get confirmation here that Art is officially a demon.
Yes.
And that, for me, all the wheels start turning. And before...
You do the lean forward meme.
Yeah, exactly. But before we even get to that, I think it's an interesting... There's an idea of kind of focusing the lens throughout a franchise and learning what you want to do. Not just what you're good at, but what you're interested in. And in rewatching these movies in one day before seeing Terrifier 3, The first movie is so focused and lean and blue. You talked about this before with colors. I wanted to kind of roll this in.
Sure.
The first movie is very cold and singular, and there's a sense of surrealism.
Are you talking about Terrifier 1 or the...
Terrifier 1.
Okay, thank you.
There is a sense of surrealism there,
Yes,
where you can't believe this shit is happening.
Yeah.
But it also might not be. There is a dreamlike quality to it.
I see what you're saying.
If you were to compare it to other classic slashers, I think there's a lot more Nightmare on Elm Street than there is even Halloween or Friday the 13th, which I think the franchise becomes more in that sensibility. But I think it starts more Freddy.
It does, yeah.
And when you move into the second Terrifier, I think you have a lot of fantasy. That's why it was weird. It was like this 2.5 hour epic.
Right,
There was so much lore. There was swords and magical swords and angel wings and costumes, and it was a very different thing. So you go from surrealism and then you go into fantasy. And then in this third one, I feel like we're kind of boiling down all those elements and finding the perfect tone or theme.
Yeah.
Moving into what feels like maybe an endgame for at least the Sienna story. And that's focusing all this down into a operatic religious drama.
Which feels like the the perfect balance of grounded in reality, but with elements of the supernatural.
Exactly.
It's not too much into the fantasy, but it's not, Halloween, which is incredibly grounded, except for the end when he survives. But
right. And you have that fantastical part to it where a clown can regrow from a head, and the parts where he's running around where you just see his body without the head.
Wild.
There is something fantastical to that.
Right. And then them like sitting in that house for 5 years, like, I don't know, like just like hibernating until they're reawoken by the guys who are investigating the house.
But we're leaning more and more into that religious element, and especially in this film, the religious iconography.
Yes.
Officially labeling Art the Clown a demon.
Right.
And then for half the movie, strapping a crown of thorns to Sienna's head.
That was fantastic. I loved that.
That's a very specific rivalry you're setting up there.
Right.
And
That's
I think it's perfect
Mm-hmm.
because it is suggestive. All those flyaway surreal moments in 2 and 3 where you see a bunch of fog and the light and the color just kind of fills the scene, and you get those most crazy icons. Like in this one, we got the shot of the guy who was chained up, who had the Mouth of Sauron face, who was like working that forge, building the sword.
Oh, yeah, that was cool. Yeah.
And you had a lot of that at the end of Terrifier 2 with that final battle where she like harnesses the power of the sword and beheads Art the Clown. Those like flyaway surreal moments, they feel biblical. That feels like great religious drama.
Definitely.
And now that I'm thinking about it, just to circle back to something we talked about before, I think the singular kill of this movie for me isn't a kill. The thing that we have to wrestle with and think about and look at for a long time, the most fucked up kill here, Sienna doesn't die, but everything we see her go through when she's wearing the crown of thorns,
it's pretty brutal.
I think that's the scene that's going to stick with me in the same way the Saw in the first one did and the bedroom scene in the second one did.
Okay, yeah.
I feel like that's kind of it.
I know what you're saying.
The sound effects of Vicky putting the crown on her head and feeling it like cut into her scalp.
Yeah.
You're thinking about that every time you see her after that.
Every time she has to move. And then all the stuff with her hands. Oh,
exactly.
It's brutal.
And even more Christ-like injuries that she takes with the hands.
Well, yes, yeah.
But all of those put together, I feel like that is the sequence for this film.
Sure. And to continue like the religious iconography thing, even the way that the uncle's body is like strapped up to the wall, he looks like he's hanging like he's on a cross.
Totally.
But in a very horribly messed up way. And this being said at Christmas is the birth of the Messiah, and so you could think about it sort of as this like simultaneous crucifixion and rebirth of Sienna as this savior character, of course, knowing she has to now go down to hell and save Gabbie. Like, that's really interesting.
And as a corruption of that Christian rebirth, we get Art the Clown trying to rebirth himself, sort of.
Yes,
in the same way we find out he's a demon, we kind of find out what's going on with Victoria. Why is she still around? What's going on there? We find out that she is sort of this vessel. And when she starts talking at the end of the movie with Art's voice, I thought that was fascinating.
That was cool.
Because Art the Clown, of course, never speaks.
Right.
How did you feel about this, kind of hearing him speak through someone else?
I liked it because I feel like once you're 3-4 movies deep and you still haven't heard your villain's motivations, it can maybe feel a little, I don't know, disconnected, and like you're not quite sure why any of this is happening. And especially when you're going to lean this hard into the lore, you have to have some way to explain what your villain wants and like why they're here, what their goal is, what they're motivated by. So I think doing that through Victoria was a smart choice.
You know what it reminded me of? And I think if you're leaning into the religious drama and horror of this, that biblical stuff, it is so sweeping and epic and profound, and it just speaks to us and dazzles us. If it's suggestive, and it has to be indirect. So Art finally hearing him speak through someone else reminded me of The Exorcist.
Oh, yeah.
Where you only hear Pazuzu talk through Reagan.
Oh, cool.
So it's still at arm's length. You can't see it. You can't interact with it. It's not corporeal. You know, he talks about that would be too vulgar a display of power. That's one of those lines from The Exorcist that everyone remembers.
Yeah.
Because it's suggestive, it's still harnessing and sort of terrorizing your mind and employing your imagination to see what
could this thing be?
Whatever the spirit is that is inside this form of, circus clown. That thing is more scary in my imagination.
Yes, well, and it's even the more scary by being inside a body, because you then extrapolate onto yourself, like, oh, that could happen to me. I could be taken over by this thing, because it's, especially when it's Reagan, because it's a little girl, that's so scary.
And it really complicates your relationship with Victoria, because she's not just scary. She's now someone who you've seen all the horrible shit that happened to her, and now you feel bad for her.
You feel very bad for her. Like
she's
not only does she have to go through all of that, now her body is continuing to be used in this way. Yep. It's horrible. Yeah.
And that idea of her being a vessel, and that the climax of the movie is Art trying to turn Sienna into a similar vessel. For me, of course, that casts Victoria and Sienna as sort of backwards Faustus characters.
Oh, okay.
And if we know that Art is a demon, now we get to think of him as a Mephistopheles. But it's even scarier, because it's not the demon swoops in and, like the genie in the bottle, offers the temptation to the guy and he has to sign over his soul. It's not that simple. It's more scary because it's more unpredictable. If Art is our Mephistopheles, he doesn't have an agenda. He doesn't have a job working for Satan where his job is to gather souls and get as many, he has a certain quota for the month of how many contracts he has to get signed from new people, how many souls he has to recruit. It's not like that. He is an independent agent. He's trying to get vessels so he can cause harm. He's a nihilist. The thing he likes is causing destruction. He delights in causing this evil and cruelty and mutilation.
Right. His goal isn't just to kill people.
No.
Because otherwise he would do everything a lot more quickly and efficiently and with less cleanup.
So he wants vessels in the same way you want, like, Horcruxes in Harry Potter. He just wants these get-out-of-jail-free cards so he can keep coming back if things happen to him.
Right.
That is so much scarier. Because there is no grand plan, because he's not part of this underworld bureaucracy where he has this quota of souls that he recruits and ferries away.
He has nothing that's controlling him or keeping him, like, in control. There's nothing that is governing him. He's completely unchecked.
So even though we do break some of that illusion, we demystify him a little bit by indirectly hearing him speak and learning some of the magic system, learning some of the rules, the answers we get make him much more scary to me. I was impressed by that. Usually when you reveal more context about a villain, they get less scary.
Yeah, you're like, oh, because now I get it. And now it's not this big, scary unknown. Now it's like totally clear. And
I think it's more scary now.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Maybe this is a nice moment to transition into thinking about the future. So we've got some questions, some ideas I wanted to bat around with you in the general, like under the umbrella of speculation. Now, I'll start with something you mentioned before. Soap opera rules. You don't see someone die, you don't see a body, they're not dead. Right. Jonathan's
got to come
You can
back.
steal his glasses and put them on someone else's skull.
I mean, I really didn't think about this until when we started talking about this today. I was kind of just assuming he was dead. But yeah, now the more we talked about it, the more we tried to understand the rules of this movie, what they're showing, what they're not showing. I think Jonathan's got to be alive.
Sure.
Especially because now Sienna, except for Gabbie, she has absolutely nobody. Because her aunt and uncle are dead, like her friends are already all dead. And so like it would be hard for her to go into the next movie alone. you need to add a new character for somebody she can connect with, and that's exhausting. So I think Jonathan's probably gonna not be dead.
And if so much of her arc in this film was the guilt she feels about people she's surrounded herself with who have then been killed by Art the Clown, I think she's going to be increasingly isolated.
Sure.
And insular. We're not gonna see, I imagine, we're not gonna see her have a boyfriend in the next movie.
No, I don't think she's got time for a boyfriend right now.
But it's also that if she's still thinking about her friend and how she was killed because she was near Sienna in Terrifier 2, I imagine she's going to continue to isolate so that more people around her aren't like cannon fodder for Art.
Exactly. She's not going to try to make connections with people and put people in danger.
But you do need other characters in the film. So yes, Jonathan's perfect there.
Yeah.
Maybe we have him as more of a vessel like Victoria. But we know him and care about him a little more. Maybe that's a way to keep him around.
Maybe she's able to undo any vesselizing that he's done.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I could see that.
The other thing, and you and I clocked this right out of the theater, is a conspicuous absence from Terrifier 3.
Yes.
There was a character introduced in Terrifier 2 who we thought was a new franchise mainstay. And rewatching Terrifier 2, of course, I'm talking about the pale little girl.
It's the little girl. Where is she?
And she's got all the Art the Clown type makeup on. She's got the one braid hanging up to the side. The way she's introduced at that laundromat scene where Art cleans all of his clothes.
That's right.
We very much see that she is part of his imagination. Or maybe she's on the same demon realm. We see these objective shots of the scene of them playing patty cakes, and she's not there.
Right, like she's not as corporeal as Art is. Right.
Yeah, she's somehow less in our world than Art is.
But she wasn't here at all in the third one.
Nothing.
They mentioned her. Yeah, in Jonathan's letters to Sienna, because Jonathan was doing all this like demon research.
As like the key objective. He says they have to kill the
little girl.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like that's what they have to do. He gives her that like quest.
So where is she?
Right.
What happened? What's going on?
So we've got all these dangling elements that we can play with in the next film. Of course, we also get that sort of... We get the quest given at the end of the film of, she has to go save Gabbie now,
right.
from part of the underworld. So we have all these elements that are up in the air. Like, we set up Terrifier 4 here. We have the Jonathan question, we have the Gabbie quest, and we have the absence of the pale little girl.
Yes.
Did you feel that amount of setup for 4 made 3 feel incomplete, or did it just get you excited for 4?
No, it in other genres that could make it feel incomplete, but I think in a horror franchise, of course you got to set up your next one. I mean, I think I wish it had gone a little bit further. I think trying to save Gabbie maybe should have happened here. I think Gabbie shouldn't have. I don't think that's where it should have ended with Gabbie, but the setup with the little girl and Jonathan I think is perfect. Yeah. What do you think?
Oh, well, I'm just wondering how we're going to do that. So from earlier, was that, oh God, I completely have lost track of time lately. When did John Wick 4 come out? Was that this year or last year?
I think it was earlier this year.
So the way that movie ended...
Now I can't
spoilers,
remember.
I guess, for John Wick 4.
I could look it up while you're talking.
He kind of dies at the end. But of course, there's a chance he can come back.
Right.
And I've seen this pitch. I mean, everyone's kind of come to the same idea online that a cool version of the 5th movie would be him having to fight his way through the underworld and kill again everyone he's killed so far.
That would be great.
To like earn his way back to the land of the living.
Yeah, it was last year, by the way, John Wick 4.
So there's a certain surrealism and kind of high fantasy in that too. It's sort of Dante with, a lot of guns.
Right, it'd be fun.
Is that what we're setting up for Terrifier 4?
Like she's going to be fully in the underworld for a long time?
Is she going to have to jump down into the fog machine and run through hell to save Gabbie? Is this going to be like the Further in the Insidious movies?
I think what's probably going to happen, here's what's going to happen, is we're going to, Terrifier 4 is going to open on, and I realize this, I'm going to be so wrong, but this is what I think right now.
These are theories.
This is it. We open on Terrifier 4. It's the moment after all of this has happened at the end of Terrifier 3. It's like immediate continuation, right? She can't get down to wherever Gabbie is because the portal has closed. So what does she do? She goes off. She tries to recover. She goes to the hospital, whatever. And then, she's trying to figure out what to do. And lo and behold, there's Jonathan. And they reunite and we learn what the fuck happened to Jonathan. And maybe he is a vessel. Maybe he's not. I don't know. Then they probably got to go through this whole plot of figuring out how the fuck to get down there. How do they get down there? What do they need to do? Oh, remember the little girl? Maybe she can help us. Maybe we can use her. I don't know. They're going to do something. I think most of the movie is going to be them on Earth trying to figure out how to get down there and then the climax is them down there.
Sienna trying to get down there?
Yes. I don't think they're going to get down there until the end of the movie.
Because if we do sort of a split timeline thing here, and Sienna is, of course, still alive and in the realm of the living, maybe she's trying to hunt down Art.
Yeah.
And get more information or whatever, track him to wherever he fucking sleeps at night. And then you have this other plot line, which is in this foggy, weird underworld.
Oh,
because,
you think we'll follow Gabbie?
Well, that's an opportunity to bring back some characters if we're in need of them.
I see.
Maybe Jonathan is dead, but we need some characters
maybe
in the
he's
dead
down
place
there
right
with
now.
her.
You
That
have
would be
Jonathan
cool.
there. You have Victoria there, maybe.
Yeah.
And you can get her without the makeup. You can get some more context and tragedy in that character.
I see.
Maybe you bring back the dad and the
Sure,
mom
sure.
and the aunt. Like, you have choices in this underworld. I don't know how to show it. I mean, I referenced Insidious, but I do love that depiction.
Yeah,
I love
it's
the
beautiful.
further. I think it's incredible and
Yeah.
still eerie and effective while being impressively low budget, which is sort of the calculus you need for this franchise.
That's the golden ratio of things. Yeah.
But also, I think there's sort of a Sisyphean kind of quality to Sienna fighting to get Gabbie back, but I think it kind of breaks the rules of the world if we get her back. If we get Jonathan back, if we get any of these people back.
Well, but that's the thing is, I don't think that wherever Gabbie went, I don't think she just went down to where all the dead people are, because Gabbie didn't die. Gabbie did.
Maybe.
But I'm saying
We didn't see her land.
But I'm saying she didn't die here in the terrestrial realm. We didn't see her die here, and now her like spirit is down in hell. The same way that like the uncle and aunt are dead. Sienna's parents are dead.
Yeah.
Like, so I don't know what the fuck's going on with Jonathan, but I don't think that Gabbie is going to be like encountering the spirits of dead people, because she didn't die in the same way. So I think she like, or if she does encounter them, they'll be in a different state than she is. Like, she still has her body. She's still alive, you know?
Do we want her, though, as a recurring franchise character?
I mean, I was saying this to you in the car after the movie. I really liked Gabbie.
Oh, okay.
Normally when there's like a tween girl in a movie, they always make her very annoying. Like, especially like now, they try to make her too like cool and like strong female character. I'm like, she's literally 13. Like, 13-year-olds are a mess. Like, but like, or they make her too cute and too young. She was perfect. I admired how like she is still very much a kid and like looks up to Sienna so much, but also like is getting that like confident streak of like becoming an adolescent and all that. I thought she was great. I really liked her. I liked her and Sienna's relationship. So I enjoyed her, and I wouldn't mind seeing more of her. You're looking at me with suspicion.
No,
I don't think you like her.
I think I feel a bit more mercenary about her, because
Okay.
I like her about as much as I liked Jonathan or the mom or the aunt or the uncle. I like them in as far as they further Sienna's story, but I have no use for them on their own.
Huh. Oh, okay. See, I'm pretty invested in Gabbie, especially now that I just see her fucking parents die like that.
Well,
Like, I'm invested in her.
Let's zoom out a little more.
Okay.
Does this franchise only exist as long as Sienna's alive?
At this point, yeah, I think so. I think
And is that okay?
I think if they kill Sienna, they can't keep going. You know, like, I think she's such a key part of the story now. I mean, I know that we've seen Art exist in his own right outside of and without Sienna, but I think she's so crucial now. I don't think you can lose her and keep the franchise going.
Because she's killed him a number of times, and he keeps coming back. And I like that. I think Art should be the only character who keeps coming back. But it does sort of feel like the story would be over when she finally, in whatever form, finds the heart of whatever, and finally does defeat him.
Sure.
I feel like that would be the end of the story. Is that where we see the thing that happens to every other horror franchise, where the main story completes and they just keep making movies, where you either do a remake or a reboot or in a different time, or it's kind of a period piece, or you get the origin story? Would you want to see how whatever this demon spirit is infect Art the Clown, whoever that guy was who worked at the circus?
Yes.
Would you want to see that story?
I would be really curious about that. Yeah, I think that's the only thing you could do once Sienna's story ends, is go back and get the origins of Art. I think that would be fascinating.
And I think that would be great. Also, in the same way you get that one scene out of the whole the It franchise where you saw both of those movies, you get one scene with Bill Skarsgård without the makeup on.
Oh, yeah.
I would love to see a lot of that for Art the Clown.
Yes, me too. I would really enjoy that, I think, because you can't do anything past Sienna, and you can't have her keep killing him and then it gets boring. Yeah. I think here's what I think is going to happen. I think in the 4th movie, she's going to get Gabbie, but not defeat Art. In the 5th movie, she'll defeat Art, and then the 6th movie is an origin story of Art. That's what I think is going to happen.
Does Sienna become Gandalf and you have to kill her off and then Gabbie defeats Art? Like, that's what I'm worried about. That's how you keep it rolling, because I don't want that either.
I don't want that either. No.
I'm so taken by
I don't want the
Lauren
next
performance.
generation. I want Sienna and Gabbie together. I don't want Sienna and then it moves on to Gabbie. That's boring.
My first loyalty is still to Art the Clown because he was there
yes.
first. But I'm almost as loyal to Sienna.
Yeah, me too. Also, just because Lauren Lavera is so good.
Fantastic.
She's so good.
And we were talking about the writing and directing leveling up between every film. I think she's even better here than she was in the second.
Yeah, and she was great in the second one too. She's a fantastic actor. I really enjoy watching her.
I mean, I trust them with whatever direction they go in the future.
Me too. That's the thing. Like,
but it's fun to think about.
Especially because they're avoiding big studio interference, which is often the death of so many creative ideas. So, I mean, again, not that like, I'm not an idiot. I know that they don't have just free reign to do anything and whatever they want, no matter what. Like, there are limitations, both budgetary and whatever else anybody else is going to fund. But
there's
I'm just
a
saying,
lot of creative freedom compared to other franchises.
Yes. So I trust these people a lot. So whatever they do, I'm sure it's going to be great.
And they're not going to do the easy thing.
No.
There's just no way that the next movie is, what does Art the Clown do on a different holiday? We're not doing that.
Well, let's do Easter.
There's no way. Yeah, exactly.
Let's keep the Jesus thing going and do Easter. Valentine's Day. Yeah, that would be dull.
I admire it as much as I enjoy watching it. I just love this franchise. Loved this new entry. We've been hyped for this for 2 years.
Yeah.
And somehow it met and exceeded hopes and expectations.
For sure.
Yeah, I had a wonderful time at this film.
If you have not seen Terrifier 3, you gotta go see it.
Run, don't walk to your nearest theater. It's great
so
with an
much
audience
fun.
too. And I'll as far as the theatrical experience goes, maybe we can wrap up with this.
Sure.
No walkouts.
No,
Which is more than I can say for Joker 2 or Megalopolis.
Right.
Which was a flurry of walkouts throughout the entire runtime.
My God. And like famously, many people have been walking out of Terrifier 3 because it's so upsetting
Puking,
and gross.
crying, screaming.
But like, I was thinking about it. We saw this movie on like the night it came out, like, because it comes out on a Friday.
Thursday night.
We saw it on Thursday night, like when it came out at like, a very popular Alamo Drafthouse location. Like, I was
Diehards.
like, the people there knew what they were getting into. So I'm not that surprised actually that people didn't walk out. People were delighted. Our theater was having a great time. Everybody was enthralled and enchanted. We were all having fun.
And the humor.
Yeah.
Every moment of humor just killed.
Everybody was cackling. Yeah.
It was so...
It was
and
great.
Obviously, there's the physical comedy of him slapping her in the head. But
Yeah.
also just all the mime sections.
Oh, yeah. So funny.
Hysterical.
So funny.
Yeah.
And so terrible. Oh, it was great. It was great. Well, let us know what you thought of Terrifier 3 if you have seen it. You can do so if you're on YouTube. Comment below. Otherwise, you can send us an email, secondbreakfastpod@gmail.com, or send us a DM on Instagram at secondbreakfastpod. We do really like hearing y'all's ideas and thoughts and responses to what we're saying, because otherwise it's just us shouting into the void. So we like to hear what y'all think. Otherwise, I think that's all any other housekeeping? Oh, big announcement coming very soon. I know we keep saying it, but it's true. There's a big announcement coming, so keep an eye out for that. Otherwise, you can, if you want to listen to our discussion of Black Christmas and other bonus episodes, you can join our Patreon.
And the Art the Clown, all of those, or the previous episode.
Well,
and
that's not on Patreon. I was plugging the Patreon, but yes, we do have a whole
I stepped
other...
on the transition. I'm sorry.
It's
But
fine.
we do have plenty of other horror coverage on Patreon.
Yes.
There's Maggie talking about Salem's Lot, the book.
Yeah.
Going through that. We have the Breakfast Buffet series, which is dozens of works of art in these different roundup
A
episodes.
lot of those have
We
horror
have
in them.
A dozen. I think all of them have some form of horror. There's one that is the female body horror episode.
Yeah, that one was
I
fun.
love that one. That's Suspiria and Love Lies Bleeding and a bunch of other fucked up awesome movies.
Some nun movies, yeah.
But yeah, we have tons of other horror on the normal episodes and even more and in more thorough detail on the Patreon.
Yeah, well, especially our regular episodes. We didn't do it this summer because of House of the Dragon, but we did Summerween every summer. Like, so we've got 3 months worth of horror movie coverage and all kinds of things. So anyway, lots of horror. Obviously, we're big fans. So check it all out. Also, if you're on YouTube, we have a horror movie playlist. So like, if you just want easy peasy horror coverage we've done, it's all on there.
Terrifier 3.
Terrifier 3.
What a picture.
What a picture.
All right, we'll see you back here on Friday with another brand new episode.